decided, after one of them canceled, we decided to call the rest based on principle because, I guess we'd rather be safe than sorry. See if they would, see if they'd be open to rescheduling in the summer, and for the most part they were. So,
wow.
Yeah, so we have, we've got some 25 hours left to drive.
Oh my God.
So as we're driving back to Vegas, we're dealing with all of this, craziness. I've been telling these guys the whole time that they're really going to love the drive between Denver, just basically the whole Colorado drive, but genuinely love the drive between Denver and Vegas, or at least the first maybe 6 to 8 hours of it, because man, oh man, it's some of the most beautiful, serene driving that you will do in your whole life.
Yeah, and my grandfather always talked about taking me to the mountains in Denver and in Colorado, and he never was able to do that. And I remember falling asleep on this long drive that we just took, and then just waking up and just seeing it all around, and that was a pretty cool experience for me. Finally getting to see that, so it was pretty cool.
I mentioned at one point that Jorge would probably really enjoy this, and he said exactly these words.
I actually don't know what you're talking.
You don't remember? Okay. He said Jorge would his pants.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, probably.
Yes.
Yeah. I guarantee it.
I guarantee it. Yeah, it's some of the most beautiful driving, and that beauty as a backdrop to the media storm and to the panic from this whole thing, from this whole coronavirus scare, was pretty surreal.
Yeah.
We're experiencing this really beautiful nature and this really beautiful drive, while simultaneously concerning ourselves with whether or not we'll have jobs in a couple of months, whether or not we'll be able to survive, whether or not New York is going to go up in flames, food riots, stock. We actually, the stock market crashed, and there was a run on the stores for all sorts of weird stuff. I mean, hand sanitizer alone, that obviously went.
Paper.
But toilet paper, canned goods, produce, everything's just gone. The supply chains apparently were not actually affected that much, and but the stores did empty really quickly.
They had a lot of vegan stuff in there for us, though.
That's true. Fortunately, nobody wants to eat the food that we eat, so we were able to go in there and get all the tofu and fake meats and fake cheeses and all that stuff that we wanted. And the vegetables were generally still there too, which I can't really explain, but there you go.
At the end of the day, this has definitely been one of the strangest 2 months of my life.
Don't do it during a global pandemic.
That's the first bit of advice.
That's the first bit of advice. That's number one. Tip
number two.
Tip number one. Don't do it during a global pandemic. Tip number two.
Tip number two is don't spend all your money on alcohol.
Tip number two is don't spend all your money on alcohol. Tip number three, do not forget time zone changes.
That's tip number one.
That may beat out the coronavirus or a global pandemic.
Yeah, that goes number three. Yeah, switch those two.
So tip number one, do not forget about time zones, or better yet, remember time zones. Okay? So many times we're like, oh, we got 5 hours to get to this place, and here we left with 6.5 hours to get there. A 5-hour drive, 6.5 hours. All of a sudden we lose a half hour to gas stations, and we stop at this place, and then boom, we cross over a time zone because we're heading east, and we lose an hour, and now we're right on time or 10 minutes late. How did that happen? We left with so much extra time. So if you're headed east, you're going to be losing time on time zones. I know this seems self-evident, but you will forget. So please, please look up the time in your destination city. Make sure you leave on time.
Another good little bit of advice that I've learned is listen and observe your audience that you're lecturing to, and look at what it is that they're receiving from you and adapt your lecture to them. Make sure that the people that are watching your lecture are understanding what you're saying and able to use the stuff that you have explained to them. Don't just, get set and fixed in your ways of how you want your lecture to be, but listen to what the audience and the people that are listening to you what would work best for them.
Absolutely, yeah. Because especially if you're doing a magic lecture, some of these guys in the clubs, they'll range from, everyone's in a different place. Everyone's in a different place. They may be a really good magician who's only been in it for 2 years. They may be an expert who's been in it for 10, but has never, and they know everything there is to know, and they're a real worker. And so you speak to them on that level. What really works in front of crowds. They may just be a hobbyist, but they've been in it for 40 years, so they're kind of locked in, but they don't actually perform for anybody except for maybe friends and family once in a while. And so they're interested in something else, maybe just secrets. Definitely adapt to your audience, because they will be responding to different things. And don't be afraid to poll them at the beginning and find out where the workers are, where the close-up guys are, the stage guys, the mentalism guys, and gals, of course. So don't be afraid to ask, and try to be ready to adapt. And it doesn't even necessarily mean that you're changing your routines. It just means that you might change the way that you present them and the way that you explain them.
Yeah.
You may be able to leave out some details for the workers, for instance, that they'll already know. Or you may be able to go into more detail if you've got a bunch of very, very beginner types. Don't make it a dealer demo, they hate that. But definitely bring stuff to sell.
Yeah.
And bring it at all different. Yeah, they want to support you, especially if they like the lecture, if it's a good lecture.
Yeah.
People really wanted to support us. They told us that. But we had just our books with us, some more pricier items, and we were getting a lot of really good feedback, and so we assumed that people wanted to support us, and so we started making these thumb writers, and all of a sudden they started flying out of our hands. And that was really useful. That means that pretty much anyone in whatever financial situation they were in, they could walk away with a toy, and they could support us if they liked us.
Yeah, and also you want to get a system down for how you keep track of what you're selling and stuff like that.
If you've got multiple people, definitely.
Yeah.
If you are lecturing with a partner, then put one person in charge of sales. If not for the whole trip, then at least per lecture, one person can be in charge of sales, and like he said, have a system for ticking off what has been sold and how to collect money and all that kind of stuff. Square was good. Just be prepared with your square prices versus your cash prices.
Yeah.
And definitely always have change, and definitely try to round things off to bill sizes.
Above all else, have fun.
Meow. Meow. That's right, buddy. Meow. That's how I feel too.
I think he says it is bedtime.
Yeah, he's done.
It is
He's telling us he's done.
1:45 a.m.